Commission. I'm their communication officer, and I'm also an educational advisor. In this short time, we're going to cover some reasons why your students might be interested in U.S. study. We're going to talk about the application components involved, and as a school advisor, how you fit into that, an application timeline, and we're also going to talk about ways Fulbright can support students, parents, and schools. So let's just go ahead and get started. So what is the Fulbright Commission? Well, a little bit about Fulbright. Fulbright was actually founded in the aftermath of World War II by a U.S. Senator, Senator Fulbright. He had been a Rhodes Scholar, and he had done an exchange to the UK, and he thought, after World War II, what better way to help prevent another world war than to initiate more cultural exchanges? And so the mission of the Fulbright Commission is to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. We support educational exchange in two ways. One way is we have scholarships for postgraduate study and research. The other way is through our advisory service. So our advisory service works with students and schools who are interested in any level of U.S. studies, so prospective undergrads or short-term study, postgrad, etc. We're also part of the U.S. State Department's Education USA network of advisors worldwide. There are 150 commissions around the world. It's always between the U.S. and another country. We're not-for-profit, and we're funded by both the U.S. and U.K. governments. So just a little bit about Fulbright and our mission. So before we go any further, I just want to quickly show this slide. I've been in the UK for quite a while now, but in case I slip up and I use the wrong term. So for example, college, university, institute, school, all of those words are used interchangeably with university. Class, course, module. Public school or a public university in the US means something very different than in the UK. A public university means a university that has received state funding. So you might find that it's a larger institution. You might find that the student body has more students from within that state because they're paying taxes for that contribute to the funding for that university. But they welcome international students, just a slight difference. So why study in the US? Okay, US study might not be for everyone, but for about 8,900 UK students last year, it was a good fit. And I'm going to go over some reasons why. I mean, I'm not here to sell US study. I don't see a rise in my paycheck every time another student goes over, believe me. But I want to present some information to you so that your students and as an advisor, you can help them make an informed decision to see if it's a good fit. So the first reason students cite that they're interested in US study is the reputation of US universities. We surveyed British students who were getting their student visas at the U.S. Embassy who were about to head over to the States, and we asked them why. We said, why did you decide to pursue study in the States? And this was the number one reason 91% of them indicated. U.S. universities are respected worldwide. I don't think rankings are the end-all, be-all, but if you do look at world rankings of universities, there are a lot of U.S. institutions at the very top. Cutting-edge research and lots of research opportunities for students, even as an undergrad. Also, there's a wide variety of institutions. There are probably over 4,000 that offer some type of undergraduate qualification, to about 2,000 roughly that offer a bachelor's degree. I mean, with so many to choose from, you're more likely, sorry, that was my mom. You're more likely to choose a university that is a good fit for you location-wise, weather-wise, academics, etc., etc. So with that opportunity, students really appreciate that and might choose U.S. study. The second reason your students might be interested in U.S. study is for the opportunities to get involved on a U.S. campus. I did my undergraduate degree in the States, and I did my postgraduate degree in the UK. And there are merits to both systems. We promote exchange both ways. But I cannot speak highly enough of the opportunities to get involved on a U.S. campus. In fact, U.S. institutions make a concerted effort, it's part of their mantra, it's part of their policy, to encourage students to get involved and learn outside the walls of the four walls of the classroom. Okay? They think that the experience of getting involved in student activities and sports and clubs is all part of the educational experience and helps to mold and shape that student. I've also heard UK students say that the atmosphere, the fact that a lot of their US peers might get involved and volunteer and join intramural sports on campus means that they were getting more involved, perhaps more so than they would have if had they gone to a UK university. You might find that there are hundreds of organizations per campus, and it's good perhaps for a student's CV. Maybe they can take the marketing position for the International Student Society, or president of the Philosophy Society, or engineering fraternity. Really building a lot of skills. I mean, I know that sororities and fraternities are made fun of a lot in movies, but it takes a lot to run a sorority, all the philanthropy work that they do, all of the community service, organizing maybe 100 girls, having meetings every week. It really can build up your CV even before you enter the job market. Also, just to go out and have fun and get to know your international peers and the American students there. I've heard of the Ninja Club. I've heard of the Quidditch League, if you have any Harry Potter fans as students. So really, the opportunities to get involved on a U.S. campus are endless. Another reason students choose U.S. study is the liberal arts curriculum and also the focus on teaching. How many of you had heard of liberal arts before? Maybe if you've helped students look at institutions. What does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, what it means is that U.S. institutions want their graduates to be well-rounded students. They also don't think a 17 or 18-year-old knows exactly what they want to do when they enter university. And so what is liberal arts? Well, with a liberal arts curriculum, it's pretty flexible. A university, to some extent or another, will say, right, if you want to graduate from our university, of course you're going to be taking modules or classes in your subject area, your major. Suppose we're all an English major. They say, right, a lot of your classes are going to be English or literature or writing. But in order to graduate with a degree from our university, we expect you to take at least a couple modules outside your area of study. Maybe we want you to take one art history class, or we want you to take one psychology, or basic science, or basic math class. To expose students to other subjects, to give them that flexibility that if they want to change or switch majors 1, 2, 3 times within that first year or 2 years, they're allowed to do so without getting behind. They might discover they loved economics, but they never really had the opportunity to take it before and didn't realize it, or psychology or something else. You can also do what's known as double major, which means you have 2 main areas of study. Maybe you have 2 passions, international business and Japanese. You can take a lot of classes in both areas. Or you can major and minor, where, again, your main area of study might be one subject, but you want to take a few taster sessions or classes in another. So, for example, in my undergrad, I studied international relations. That was the main part of my study, but I took some German classes and had a German minor just to keep German fresh as I studied it in high school. There's also more of an emphasis on teaching. So your students might find that they would spend more time in the class, more time interacting with the students and with the professor than perhaps they would if they'd gone to the UK. And I know I'm speaking generally, but in the UK, universities emphasize more independent research. Whereas in the US, they want the professor wants to see the student in class, they want to know their opinion, they want them to speak up and participate. So if you have a student who doesn't want to share their opinion or speak up or participate, they might have a tough time, especially as they start to specialize and get into smaller class sizes. I think this next point might surprise a lot of people in this room. The funding opportunities as a reason to go to the US. I think the US education is often associated with higher sticker prices, and sometimes that's true. That the US tuition fees, the sticker prices we call them, might be a bit higher than they are in the UK sometimes. But if we've been paying higher fees for a lot longer, a well-developed funding, financial aid, and scholarship culture has developed in the US. And so you might have that initial sticker price of a US university, but it can be knocked down fairly quickly if they're wise in where they apply, if they're applying for the scholarship opportunities available. So there's a big if there. The funding's out there, actually about $143 billion worth of financial aid. It's just up to the student to go after it and do their research and make sure they're applying to universities that offer funding to international students, or need-based aid or merit-based scholarships, that they're applying to external funding bodies that offer scholarships to international students. We talk a lot about this on our website, so I know I can't present everything right now, but please do take a look at our website. About 1 in 3 international students cited a scholarship as their primary source of funding in the US. So just please bear that in mind. This is Joel. He's a former advisee of ours, just to mention. He's from East London. he received the British Moorhead Kane Scholarship, which fully funds his studies to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He has a summer enrichment program. He's just a fabulous student, a great kid, and having the time of his life. Another reason to consider U.S. study is for students to internationalize their CV. I know at 17, they might not, or 16, they might not be thinking about that yet. It's a tough job market right now. And what better way to make you stand out than to have gone to another country, have rose to the occasion, done well, succeeded, adapted, acclimated, immersed yourself in a new culture, a new education system. I think that shows a lot to an employer. I mentioned earlier that environment of getting involved and joining clubs on campus. If sometimes in our office we see a UK job applicant, a candidate from the UK and a candidate from the US. And oftentimes I have to admit the US candidate has more experience before they've graduated than that UK student. Again, we promote exchange both ways, not saying anything negative about UK education. Also, with a student visa, you're allowed to work up to 20 hours a week on campus during term time and up to 40 hours during holiday time. You're also allowed to participate in something known as optional practical training. Optional practical training, or OPT, it means that you are allowed to stay in the U.S. up to a year after you've finished your studies, sometimes for students in the sciences up to 2 years, and work in your field of study. So once again, internationalizing your CV. So if you have a student who's studying international relations at Georgetown in Washington, and they're able to secure a position there for an NGO, let's say, after they finish their degree, they're then allowed to work in their field of study, which looks fabulous on a CV. The last point I want to touch on is, of course, what study abroad can do for you. It can expand your horizons. You learn about a new culture. The U.S. spans 6 time zones, and there's such diversity in people, geography, culture, so much more so than your students are seeing in reality TV shows and 90210 and whatever else they're watching on TV right now. And so what better way than to go and explore for yourself? We're also about exchange, and so it's about that UK student interacting with other international students, interacting with their US peers, and sharing what it's like to be from the UK, talking about current events or funny moments, and you say this, but I say that, and your accent this, and my accent that, over lunch. And it's a really special experience. I've been in the UK for about 3.5 years, and I'm still learning, I promise you, every day. So it might be one of my last points for why study, but it's an important one. This is an ideal timeline. We don't feel like you have to copy everything down and have a timeline on our website. But just to give you a general idea, the earlier you get started, the better. The first step is really learning about the U.S. education system, figuring out is it a good fit for me as a student, then starting to narrow down the choices of institutions, taking that 2,000 and narrowing it down. You can apply to as many universities as you want. A student can apply to 1, they can apply to 20. No one's really going to care. Maybe you might care because it's a little bit more paperwork for you. So we say it's good to do 5 to 6 universities, well-chosen universities, because if you're applying to 20, really, you haven't really done enough thinking about where you actually want to go. So they might want to, as they approach the autumn before they want to go, so we've got a year before they'd want to go, maybe even earlier, they definitely want to prepare and sit an admissions exam if they have to take one, which I'll talk about on the next slide. We have on the 29th of September our U.S. University Fair. We invite over 125 U.S. universities to London. We have Ivy League institutions, we have private, public, small, large, East Coast, West Coast. Those universities that attend our college day are there because they are interested in recruiting UK students. Okay, if you think about it, an admissions office at a U.S. university has a limited budget. They would not be sending their admissions representatives or have their alumni come and exhibit if they did not want UK students to attend their institution. So it's a great event, and students can attend and talk to universities, and also test tutors and educational advisors. Then they start working on their applications. There's no one set deadline. Each university sets its own deadline. You might find some have early deadlines, which are in late November, maybe early December. And then you have some that have their regular admissions deadlines, which might be into January. And so what I would advise is for a student to take a look at the universities they're interested in, take a look at the admissions deadlines, and work backwards and ensure that they have all their components together before that time. But because there's no one set deadline, they really want to be organized and ensure that they're keeping track of what they need to do when. They would receive their admissions decision in the spring, and then they can decide whether or not they want to go. If they decide to go, they can take a look at the pre-departure section on our website where we talk about everything and more about living in the U.S. They can apply for their student visa. I do want to note that the visa process tends to intimidate and scare students. I can assure you, the U.S. Embassy people are really nice. It's a really straightforward process. It's a lot of paperwork, but it's very straightforward, and actually student visas are made a priority with the U.S. Embassy. So, if that's what's on the student's mind, please allay any of their fears. And then they begin U.S. study typically in late August that year. So that's a whirlwind tour of the application process. I did want to note something, though, that if they can sit their admissions exam, which I'll talk about in the next slide a little bit earlier, it might be a good idea just to get it out of the way in case they do want to resit it, but I'll talk about that in a moment. The types of degrees on offer, we have two-year community colleges. They offer associate's degrees, which could be good for two types of students. One, a student who's not sure for four-year universities for them. Those associate's degrees offer a bit more vocational or technical courses. Two-year community colleges are also good because a lot of U.S. students do this, and international students are welcome to do this as well. You can start off at a community college, which has more lenient admissions criteria. A lot of them don't require an admissions exam. They're much less expensive, so they're fairly cheap in comparison. And what you do is you take 2 years, maybe 2 years at that community college, and then community colleges will have relationships with U.S. universities within the area, four-year institutions. And a student can then easily transfer and spend their last 2 years at a four-year university. And so what they have on their CV is, for example, if they go to a community college in Northern Virginia, that community college might have a relationship with University of Virginia, a great institution, and that agreement might be that if a student receives a certain marks and does well in their community college years, they automatically can transfer to University of Virginia, or have a smooth process of transferring at least, and finish their last 2 years at that four-year institution. Does that make sense? And if a community college doesn't have an agreement with the university, a student might still be welcome to apply. It's just a bit more legwork on their part. Law and medicine are studied at the postgraduate level, okay? And I would caution students, actually, who are interested in studying law and medicine in the States, because as you can see, it's going to be a longer process and perhaps a more expensive process. We have more information about both of those subjects, because they are popular subjects, on our website for students to look at. So please caution them and have them research even more about those two areas. So a theme with U.S. universities is that you'll notice that there's less government control. There's more autonomy from the government. U.S. institutions set their own admissions policies, their own financial aid policies. They set their own prices. There's no UCAS. You apply to each university individually. So just something to bear in mind as you're considering the admissions process for U.S. institutions. The application process. It is a slightly longer application process, a slightly longer application form, more components. Your students might roll your eyes at you. I can't promise anything. But what I would tell them, and what I do tell them, is that actually you should look at it as an opportunity to highlight more about yourself. Because U.S. admissions counselors are really getting to know that student as a person, what makes them tick, who they are, what's their story. The U.S. admissions process is a holistic process. You're applying to the university as a whole, to the admissions office. You're not applying just straight into a department, and that's what I meant earlier about that flexibility to switch. You're applying to the undergraduate admissions office. And so the U.S. admissions counselor, of course they'll look at academics, of course they will look at admissions test scores if they require them, but they also for sure are going to look at the essays, the recommendation letters, see what the student has been involved in, the extracurriculars, because again, they want to get to know that student as a person. A difference here would be I've seen students with perfect test scores and perfect marks, but if their essays were poor, they had no personality, no extracurriculars, they're not guaranteed a spot at a competitive university. Whereas I've seen the reverse, a student who has great marks, pretty good test scores, but have fabulous essays, really involved, great kids, they get into these institutions because the admissions counselor puts them into context and looks at them as a whole person. So just thinking about that as you approach the US process. So what's involved in an actual application? Well, first there's the application form. You know, pretty basic, they can get it online. It's background information. It might be a bit more intrusive than perhaps they're used to. They want to know about the student, they want to know what the student's parents do, where they went to school, what degree they have, They really want to know, again, the context of the student, who the student is, where they're coming from, their background. The next step is an admissions test. Now, most, not all, U.S. universities require an admissions test, either the SAT or the ACT. Some of the most competitive universities will require SAT subject tests as well. Now, the SAT, why do we take them? Why do we have these tests? A lot of students and advisors ask me, they say, well, we're doing A-levels. Why do we need to do these tests? Well, admissions counselors, if you think about it, are getting students from Kansas and from New York City, from Japan and from France. What's that constant, that benchmark that every student takes? Because in the U.S., there's no national standardized testing in the curriculum. It's at the state level. So how do they begin to compare these students? They needed something that was a constant, that everybody was taking. Now again, not every university requires them. Some universities that require them might waive them for international students, but you'll find, on the whole, most of them do expect a student to sit them. The SAT tests in reading and verbal, math, and writing. The ACT has an additional section about science reasoning. One more point about admissions tests, because I know we have a lot of components to cover, is that U.S. students actually don't learn or prepare for them in the classroom. Just like UK counterparts, they have to spend a little time after school or on the weekend studying, doing self-study, preparing for them. The only advantage a U.S. student would have over a UK student in this scenario would be the fact that they're used to this style of testing. The content isn't that hard. It's not advanced math, okay? Or they're not doing advanced calculus on this exam. It's not the content, it's the style of testing, so multiple choice, time testing, that sort of thing. I'm getting the wrap it up signal, so I'm going to have to speed through a bit more. Transcripts. So each university is required to submit on official school letterhead the marks that a student received in their time at their GCSE scores, their AS scores, their predicted A-level scores. The more information you can provide for the university, the better. So context. Is it required they can't take more than a certain amount of A-levels, they can only take 3? Or can they take as many as they want? Is a student taking the most rigorous A-levels available to them or not? Do you have to take an entrance exam to get into your school or not? Give the university some context. We have a sample transcript on our website that you can refer to, which again gives them an idea of where the student's coming from and what they've achieved with what they had, I guess the means that they've had. 2 to 3 essays are typically required, again, prompts that are trying to get to know the student as a person. It's different than a UCAS personal statement. They shouldn't try and rework that. Again, we have information about that on our website. It's more about who are you, what are your passions, what can you bring to the university, what can the university do for you. Recommendation letters. In the recommendation letter, there's nothing wrong with British Reserve, nothing wrong. Now's not the time. We have sample recommendation letters and tips for your colleagues to write, because you might find that your U.S. counterparts are going to be ecstatic in their recommendation letters. They're going to be cheerleaders. They're going to be the best marketers for their students. You should not be highlighting a negative point about the student or talking about their attendance and their punctuality. They assume that student went to class. You should be talking about anecdotes about them in class and volunteering and did they work with students and did they answer lots of questions and they do any extra projects, that type of thing. Most U.S. universities will probably require an application fee. I think I might have 2 minutes left. So I just want to show you. I'm sorry, it's so much information to cover. I will be at my stand, stand number 9, if you do have questions after. This is a typical admissions page from Rice University. We just pulled a random university, asking for an application, the SAT. I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. An application, also asking for specifying what admissions tests they want, what they're looking from the school, a teacher evaluation, that type of thing. This is, again, we have samples on our website, but just to highlight the point about the recommendation letter, this would be a UK, perhaps UK typical recommendation versus US. You notice the US used very strong language, like it was an absolute pleasure to work with Joe. He is going to be an asset to your program, that type of thing. Whereas up here, it's more about, he got decent marks. Couldn't really, that's in US, you think they had nothing nice to say about the student. Again, I've covered these points, but they're going to look at academics, they're going to look at admissions test scores, they're going to look at extracurricular activities. They don't have to be a national player. If they play piano, if they play sports on the weekend, if they have to babysit and be at home and help their family, that's an activity. Okay, so they can really put down anything. That's an extracurricular involvement. I think I have 1 minute left, and so my last point, I'm afraid I can't go over as much as I want, but please visit our website. We have so much information step by step on US Study that can help specifically for advisors and for students. We have seminars and webinars and events for students going into the admissions process. Also, we have a new, we're working with Sutton Trust on a US summer school program. It's launching, the application's due in April. It's for state school students, and they get to spend a week at Yale. So please have a look at that. I'm afraid I'm out of time. I'm so sorry. Please do visit me at my stand. And I think also one of our partner organizations, Steve from Mayflower's here, but I can't see him. Oh, there he is in the back. He's one of those organizations that help with test tutors or educational consultants. So thank you so much.